moving on, we move to the next presentation, and there's a project called Living Indus Initiative. And while ILO is the lead agency and their industrial influence target, for me personally, Faraz साहब से मैं बोलूँगा मुझे nominate कर दें as a personal advocate for that. So without a further ado, Faraz साहब has to leave too, so we'll try to move things a bit pacey. On Living Indus, Faraz साहब, please if we could have you.
Thank you so much. And for the Living Indus presentation, I'll start off by saying that while we have discussed various problems, issues in various different areas, I think that things are bad but not as dire as they are. I think we forget sometimes to look at the positive outcomes as well. That through various different institutes, various different stakeholders have been done within this country. Living Indus, if you have not heard about the initiative, I'll be very quick about it. United Nations work within any country in a 5-year term or a 5-year plan. For 2023 to 2027, this particular plan is called UN SDCF, which is UN Sustainable Development Cooperation Framework. Within this framework, there are 5 outcome areas. That these are the outcomes that all UN agencies will get together and work towards. And out of these 5, outcome 3 is specifically climate change. And this initiative, Living Indus, is actually culmination of that outcome 3. So, how Living Indus was formed, I'll quickly give you the background. If you can move to the next slide please. Next. So, everyone knows that we are facing, consistently Pakistan is ranked as the top 10 countries which are vulnerable to climate change. Increasing temperature, rainfall, shifting patterns, glacial melts, specifically we are faced with these problems due to the intense and frequent flooding and droughts. The extreme weather events have actually, their frequency has increased a lot over the past few decades, just because that we are actually heading into the climate change. But the climate strongest manifestation in Pakistan is essentially the water crisis. The water crisis that we are all dependent on. And from that perspective, if you can move one slide ahead, please. 90% of the Pakistan and 3/4 of its economy resides in just one basin, the Indus Basin, which actually formulates the geographical boundaries of Pakistan. More than 80% of Pakistan is irrigated by its waters, and if we consider population-wise, 9 out of the 10 largest cities of Pakistan are within Indus Basin. So, Indus Basin was highlighted as one of the most critical areas that actually required focus. Next slide, please. So, the challenges that it faced was that climate change, water security, the degradation of ecosystem, overstressed resources based on the growing demand that we are faced with, unchecked pollution and minimal waste management, and poor planning and inadequate readiness. The question that was asked was that Indus as a river basin has sustained a civilization for 5,000 years. Can it do for the next 100 years? Now this was the basic premise, that when we start thinking about the problems, we do not believe in this particular phrase that probably Indus will not be able to sustain in the direction that we are currently going. So there was a very strong need for coming up a solution in that particular place. Next. Next. So in December 2021, very quick background, the Prime Minister Committee for the Climate Change at that time directed Ministry of Climate Change to come up with the Indus Basin Ecological Restoration Project. This was approved because Ministry of Climate Change and United Nations held very strong consultative sessions throughout Pakistan. They were held in Islamabad, Lahore, Karachi, and various universities of Pakistan. And based on that, the cabinet approval came formally in October 2022. In both the previous COPs, Living Indus was the key initiative that was presented on behalf of Pakistan. Next, please. Next. Next. So, the vision for the Living Indus was that we aspire an Indus Basin that can sustain a thriving civilization from sources to its delta. We have taken a holistic approach in actually including this as our key statement, and a healthy Indus whose natural resources and ecosystems have been repaired, restored, and resilient in the face of climate change. With this particular goal, we started moving forward. Next, please. So, as part of Living Indus, there were 11 key priority areas that were identified. These were the thematic areas, and they cover from governance, pollution, finance, livelihood, to urban planning, tourism, culture, biodiversity, agriculture, groundwater, and communication. If you can move one next slide, please. So these were the key 25 interventions that were identified as part of the Living Indus. Out of those 25, the ones that you see are highlighted were the priority interventions that were identified by Ministry of Climate Change. That these are the priority interventions that we will be working towards. And if you see the list is so holistic in nature that essentially even when we were developing this particular list, it was not considered to be complete, and we left it as a framework where all the activities can be aligned to. Out of these, the priority interventions, one specific intervention is industrial and urban effluent treatment, which is the topic on which we are working for. So Living Indus is directly involved with respect to how we are producing wastewater, how we are producing solid waste, and how we are essentially managing that. And in the next slides, I'll give you very quick few figures which are a bit alarming, but I think within collective effort, we can still find some solution to that. Next. Next. These are some of the resource mobilizations that under the Living Indus have been done. Next slide. Next slide. So, with respect to the Indus and effluent, we had to establish a baseline. And the baseline started off by saying this, that out of 388 cities, only 8 have wastewater treatment facilities which are partially functional or dysfunctional. Now, 388 cities of Pakistan and 8 waste treatment plants, I do not think that this is due justice with respect to what we could have been done. But obviously there are challenges associated with that. And challenges are cost intensive intervention requiring collaboration and funding. We needed to have a common platform, put resources together in one particular direction so that we can move forward in the right direction. And the second one was the policy execution and implementation. We have very different policies, frameworks, laws that actually address the problem, but we still believe that there is a degree of coherence that is required, specifically in terms of implementation. So next slide. So if we see the regulatory framework, even the National Climate Change Policy of 2021 focuses on wastewater. Pakistan Penal Code, 1860, Section 277, it uses these words, and I have exactly pasted them here, that it punishes anyone who fouls public water, springs or reservoir, making it unfit for use. But consider the penalty. The penalty is up to 3 months of imprisonment and rupees 1500 fine. That is the state that we are currently in terms of laws. Specifically, there are laws for the Karachi Joint Water Board Ordinance, Pakistan Environmental Protection Act. these are certain bits that are actually covered in the regulatory framework of Pakistan. But if we see the wastewater that we produce as a country, 962,335 million gallons annually. That is the amount of wastewater that is produced throughout Pakistan. And if we try to give a breakup of this particular wastewater, 674k million gallons is from the municipal usage, and from the industry there is 288 and 326 million gallons. Now these are the figures that are from various different studies, and they obviously would have the problem would have been aggravated to a much larger scale as compared to when this study was initially conducted under the UN platform. Similarly, the wastewater discharged to the rivers, if you look at the figures, they are pretty much exaggerating. But generally, in terms of industry, there are paper and board, sugar, textile, leather, polyester, yarn, and fertilizer industries. Obviously, water is their need, but essentially, we need to have a holistic approach to solve the problem. For a city like Karachi, since we are sitting here, I had tried to take up some figures. In terms of million gallons per day, you will not be able to find one common figure, because Karachi, in terms of its complexity and sheer scale, needs a very strong framework or research-based framework that how much wastewater is actually produced. So it is somewhat in the range of 325 million gallons per day to 432. This is quite a big range. But essentially this also tells you another problem, that how necessary it is to put in our efforts to find the actual figure, that this is what we are producing and this is how we are going to solve it. So these are some of the numbers that identify the problems. But next slide please. I have actually evaluated these gaps and put them in few bullets. The topmost that comes out again, as my colleague Dibaj has mentioned, that value chain for the waste management is probably one of the most important things that we need to focus on. There are industrial players who would be compliant at the top level, might be exporting, and essentially that does not mean that anybody who is working below them at the SME level or at the informal level is actually compliant on the same stage. So I think that we need to consider this as a holistic problem, and that's why we need to focus this as a value chain. So outsourcing can be a viable solution, but essentially it is again towards the responsibility that we need to take up. And that responsibility becomes really important when it comes to SMEs. And similarly, the lack of technical expertise, understanding effluents and what essentially every effluent actually works for. Probably the labor working would not understand the complete sense or the complete process of how that particular chemical is being used. So we need certain technical expertise that needed to be added to this. Similarly, there has to be a resource efficient and cleaner production mechanism, which I'm sure that industry is already aware of. But the point of writing this particular phrase here is that we need to actually make it a holistic view, so that everyone in the industry is at least aware of the basic issues that are existent. Similarly, the sector-specific guidelines. Sir from Pakistan Workers Foundation has already mentioned that sector-specific guidelines is something that we need to work for, and this is something that probably is one of the top priority. And again, introducing matching grants for SMEs for adopting the resource efficient and cleaner production. Innovation is another word that we use quite commonly, but saying that we need to innovate and suggesting a proper solution for innovation are two different things. I think that we need to put in our resources for that innovation, and that is something which is required. Next slide. So I have put in few things as the way forward, which are part of the Living Indus initiative, which includes the green infrastructure, understanding the value chain, focusing on common effluent treatment plants, and putting in renewable energy solutions, technical knowledge dissemination, and use of artificial intelligence for data gathering and trend analysis. These are few generic solutions that are put in place, but specifically on behalf of Living Indus, I would like to highlight that we are very strongly working towards solid waste management, specifically focusing on industry and municipal both areas, but we are dealing both the areas separately because I think the requirements are for both of them are separate. And for the solid waste management, we look forward to ILO for all their support. They have been quite effective in providing us the necessary data figures on from the Karachi platform, and I think that this is something that we need to take forward collectively, because unless and until we do not take this as a holistic approach, we will not be able to, I think, solve the problem. So this is something that we need to take forward as a combined initiative. Thank you so much.